How's it going, everyone? My name is Jorge Peruzio, and today I want to talk about my experience transitioning from old tech, so IBM, transitioning to new tech, Slack. So I worked at IBM for about 4 years, and I just recently transitioned to Slack. So if you're kind of going or considering a similar transition, I think this video will be super valuable for you, especially if you're working as a developer or developer relations or something like that, or technical fields like that. The way that I'll do this video is I'll kind of talk about some of the main differences. I'll talk salary, compensation, and then we'll kind of talk about benefits and kind of like overall culture and things like that. When I talk about like old tech, I'm kind of like referring to companies like Cisco, anything like a Dell, Intel, like kind of these older companies that have been around for a while, Oracle, something like that. And then new tech, I kind of put it in this different bucket, but like post 2000s companies, so like Twilio, Zoom, Slack, Zendesk, just kind of like newer companies that have been around for less time. The first most obvious difference is compensation. So I think new tech in general does a lot more stock-based compensation. I think old tech, at least at IBM, was like 95% of your compensation is salary. There's very little stock, very little bonus. So you basically, get the same thing every single week or paycheck. Whereas at a company like Slack, for me, stock-based compensation was about like 30 or 40%, I would say, of my compensation. So my salary was less, but my overall compensation was more. So we can even take a look at Levels.fyi. So we'll do that now. So like here I have the Levels.fyi pulled up, and you can see IBM on the left side and then Slack on the right. I think the biggest difference is especially entry level. The average is about 74,000 in difference, and I do think this is like more or less accurate. Like looking at my compensation at IBM, going from band 6 to 7 to 8 to 9, like I do think the ranges and like the kind of like the total that they show on Levels.fyi is very similar to what I was kind of getting at IBM. And then actually when I moved to Slack, so I moved from band 9 senior engineer at IBM. I moved down to a G04 at Slack. So I actually did get de-leveled. So you can see that the actual base has dropped. So like I currently am making less in base, but the stock-based compensation is kind of making up for it. It's just a different way to get compensated. So like, for example, like I won't see any of that stock for 1 year because of that whole vesting period. But that's just a lot of how offers work in Silicon Valley. Is you have that 4-year stock compensation each year. Usually like the first year is a cliff. Every company does it differently, but something to keep in mind. Now let's kind of like take a look at the benefits. You can kind of see that the maternity leave is at 18 weeks at Slack, whereas IBM is only 12. Same with paternity leave. You get a couple extra weeks at Slack. At Slack, we were getting, I think, like $75 back on our phone bill, like $100, I believe, was gym and wellness, things like that. Things that IBM really did not have, and I would kind of expect the old tech bucket to kind of not have as many perks as new tech. What about like coworkers and cultures? So just like a really quick like Google search says that employees at IBM stay for an average of 7 years. Let's see what Slack is, but I could tell you it's definitely much less. Just like what I've experienced is like old tech, definitely an older generation of people. Just like the average age of the coworker or like the average wage of the person working at IBM was a lot higher than Slack. Like you could, obviously run an experiment and things like that, but just on average, it's probably like average age of like 40s. Whereas at Slack, I would say like the average age is a little bit lower. So for me, that's great because it's like a little bit easier for me to connect with people that are around my age. I don't know necessarily if there's like more time off at IBM, but like what's really nice about Slack is that they have kind of like we have like one Friday off a month, which has been really nice. We like the company shuts down in in winter or like in Christmas. And like while at IBM the company does not shut down, like I feel like most people just aren't really working that much from like Christmas time to New Year's and stuff. But it's like so nice that at Slack, it's like an intentional, we are not working, and like don't even bother checking your Slack or your messages or your emails. One other major like cultural difference I think is people are not afraid to speak their mind. I felt that at IBM, like I almost felt outspoken in a way because I was able to like speak my mind, and I didn't really care if I was speaking to like a senior executive or a band 6 entry level intern or whatever. I feel like at Slack, it's like feedback is very much part of the culture, and like there's classes on giving feedback and getting feedback. And I feel like at Old Tech, maybe just feedback isn't stressed or emphasized enough. So either feedback or people either don't know how to give feedback, which I've definitely experienced in my prior role, or people are too scared to give feedback because the environment is so it's so hierarchical that you don't want to like overstep your boundaries. So people are scared to say, oh, like, the director is wrong because of this. Like, people are scared, I feel like, at Old Tech to kind of step up and say that. Like, one pro of like the Old Tech and just like being in a massive company like that is just like the network. So for example, if you wanted to like transfer and work in a different country or something like that, it's much harder to do that at like a new tech company because they have way less offices and like way less teams kind of spread around the world. But I think like Old Tech, especially like any big corporation, I think it would be easier given that they have more offices, and like IBM is pretty international and things like that. And I would expect that to be similar for like Oracle, Cisco, and all these like kind of like older tech companies. People didn't really take vacation at IBM, and like they kind of skirted around taking vacation. I mean, I felt like it was just hard to take vacation because there was like almost a negative connotation around it. I don't know if that's just me, but I feel like that connotation is kind of gone at New Tech, and like at Slack, at least from what I've seen, it's just people are more okay with like taking mental health time off, and the company kind of supports that. And I think another like huge difference is it really does feel like the leadership cares. For example, like our CEO, like people would post that, hey, we're getting bogged down by all these like mundane tasks and stuff. And like the CEO will literally jump in the like Slack conversation and be like, hey, look, I feel you guys, like I hear you, and we're gonna work to like fix it. So like that's also could be a part that just, Slack is smaller, so there's like less things to keep in track of. Whereas at IBM, it's just like a massive corporation. But still, it does feel like the leadership cares a little bit more. For example, like they gave us about like $1,000 for a home office setup. At IBM, we probably got like maybe like 100 to 200 max. So just like that alone kind of speaks a lot. It's just like, you're able to like really set up your home office given that we're going to be working there for so long. So I feel like Slack really invests in their employees. I also feel like I really like this about Slack. Like I think people, when they're during their like 9 to 5, like 8 to 5 or whatever, like people are on, they're responding quickly, like they're there. And then at 5, everyone's off. Like I think there's like a much tighter focus. Like there's a much more cohesive focus that I felt in New Tech, and like tighter boundaries around like after work, which has been really nice. So yeah, those are kind of the main differences that I've felt in my first 3 months.